With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halverson.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. Coming up later, officials are declaring the end of the fruit fly quarantines in California. We'll have details on that. But our top story today, a federal judge in Georgia recently blocked the U.S. Labor Department from enforcing a rule in 17 states that would prevent ag employers from retaliating against migrant workers with H-2A visas for joining labor unions. It excludes California. CJ Miller has reactions from a national ag leader on that decision.
We are thankful that the judge in Georgia has tapped the brakes on this issue.
And that's Chuck Connor, president and CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives. He's also a native of Benton County.
The biggest problem, Indiana is one of 17 states where it has been halted. We would like to see the judge's ruling apply to all 50 states. We've got a lot of other states that are facing tremendous uncertainty here in terms of, is DOL enforcing it? Do I have to comply now? Do I not? So there's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the farm labor marketplace right now over the state of this rule. Whatever is done really needs to apply across the country. It wouldn't be fair to have one farmer have one set of rules and cross over a state line and have a totally different set of rules here. So we're looking for uniformity, but we're also looking for the right action as well.
Connor said he had been pushing for farm labor reform, but disagrees with how the Biden administration has been handling the issue.
That's what really makes it kind of frustrating, because we have a bipartisan bill in Congress that has been there for so long that solves all of these problems in a way that has been supported by both farmers as well as the farm worker labor unions. And we just can't get Congress to do it. All this DOL action and the regulations they're putting in place would be a non-issue, really, if Congress would just do its job.
Connor says the ruling only creates more financial burdens for farmers.
We have seen a very, very sharp downturn based upon, dropping commodity prices. And so anything that happened earlier this spring, you can multiply that by 10x, just given the state of play in terms of prices and economic outlook on the farm today versus what may have been the case earlier in the year.
I'm CJ Miller.
Two dates in the final quarter of 2024 are set for a ranking of fiscal year 2025 funding applications for projects under the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program. Rod Bain has more.
Ranking dates are now available for conservation project funding applications associated with USDA's Agricultural Conservation Easement Program for fiscal year 2025.
That first ranking date is October 4th.
With the second ranking date set for December 20th, according to Karen Woodrich of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. This is part of ACEP's year-round application acceptance for both agricultural land easement and wetland reserve easement projects, with funding for those specific fiscal year batching periods coming from the Inflation Reduction Act. Woodrich advises
interested producers, landowners, partners really want to get their applications in as quickly as possible. We had a backlog still left over from FY24.
With ACEP project funding applications accepted at local NRCS offices. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Breakdowns during harvest time mean significant headaches. Here's Riley Smith.
Suffering a breakdown during the crop season can be devastating, especially during planting or harvest. Not only do you have to determine what the problem is and attempt to fix it, but you also have to spend the time driving to the dealership to get the parts you need. Recognizing this problem, Kloss introduced FarmPoint, which is designed to offer on-the-ground help when farmers need it. Daryl Ties, head of sales and marketing at Kloss, said FarmPoint can offer a variety of help.
So Kloss FarmPoint is a mobile-first dealership designed around bringing the dealership to the customer. And if you think about it, many of these customers have their own shops, and we like to bring the technician and the parts to the dealership to work on that farmer's, in this case, maybe combine or tractor, whatever it might be. And if you're a customer, hey, great benefits, right? I don't have to spend time taking my equipment to the store. I don't have to spend time driving to the store to pick up the part. The dealership will bring it to you, whether that's the technician or the part or even the sales advice you need on the piece of equipment you're looking at.
With locations across the Midwest, Ties said FarmPoint helps Kloss address some of the holes in their distribution channel.
So we've got some locations in Kentucky, Indiana, and then we just added a new location in Lamar's, Iowa. and then looking for our fourth location in kind of the Webster City, Fort Dodge area. Yet to be determined on where exactly, but targeting that north central Iowa.
Ties said Farm Point dealerships will help producers through the entire repair process.
From start to beginning, diagnostics to repair to parts. Our aim is to be able to get customers up and running that day, of course, but most certainly it depends a little bit on when the customer has a failure as well, right? If somebody fails in the morning, our chances of getting them up and running that day is much greater than if somebody fails maybe later in the afternoon or in the evening. But this model is about speed, and it's about going to the customer, and that's our aim, is to keep customers running.
Ties added that Kloss customers who are in Farm Point regions have really enjoyed having a technician in their area who can significantly speed up the repair process.
So the technicians are field-based, resident technicians that are around the customer and not necessarily in the store. And so what we can do is we can have a technician quickly dispatch to that machine that's down to immediately start diagnosing and determine what's wrong. And then if needed, radio back to where the parts are to get those delivered. So in essence, we're trying to save time by having those technicians near the machines with the end game of trying to take advantage of as many harvestable days or operable days that we have, right? And that's what customers are starting to experience.
That again was Daryl Ties, Head of Sales and Marketing at Kloss. For more information, visit klossfarmpoint.com. I'm Riley Smith reporting.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. In today's National Spotlight, the extreme heat and dryness across much of the country last month increased drought coverage over U.S. crops and commodities. Rod Bain reports.
A hot, dry August in much of the nation meant a significant jump in drought coverage over the past month. USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey says for the U.S. Drought Monitor for the period ending August 27th,
we saw 27.7% of the country experiencing drought. That is up almost 8 percentage points from what we saw just 4 weeks ago, 19.9% at the end of July.
With an even bigger period increase in the abnormal dryness category. What does this mean for our nation's crops and commodities in relation to drought coverage? Rippey starts with corn and soybeans in the Midwest, a region relatively wet over much of the summer that experienced increased dryness in August.
For the most part, the Midwest was immune to the dramatic changes that other areas of the country experienced.
Yet both corn and bean growing areas noted increases in drought coverage through last month. Corn and beans jumping from 5% in drought to 8 and 12% respectively by August end. However, it was a different story for southern grown crops.
Just 11% of the U.S. cotton crop in drought near the end of July. That nearly quadrupled to 43% as we approached the end of August. Some late season deterioration across the Great Plains, taking the sorghum production area in drought from 29% near the end of July up to 45% by August 27th.
Spring wheat growing areas were pretty much devoid of drought going into the harvest season, now complete in most of the nation.
16% of the production area in drought near the end of July, increasing to 21% as we approach the end of August.
While concerns grow about expanding drought in winter wheat production locales, especially with planting underway.
47% of the U.S. winter wheat production area is currently experiencing drought, so that does raise some concerns as we head into the planting season, whether there will be enough moisture for proper emergence and establishment of the crop.
Drought coverage also significantly increased in hay and cattle production areas during August, both at their highest percentages since the start of this year. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's National Spotlight. Now here's the livestock report. This year's income prospects for crop producers are far different from those involved in animal agriculture. Gary Crawford has more.
The Agriculture Department's new farm income forecast for this year is calling for a drop in farm profits of about 7%. USDA's chief economist Seth Myers says cash receipts from the sale of farm commodities are expected to be down about 2%. That decline
is led by crops. And so I think we can distinguish in this forecast the fortunes of crops versus livestock. And some of the revisions that were made in the 2024 forecast reflect an update in those commodity prices from where we were in February. And in a general sense, a decline in crop prices from the prior estimate in February and an increase in some of the key livestock components from that same period.
USDA is forecasting that cash receipts for crops will drop by about 10%. Sales of livestock and animal products will be up by 7%. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
U.S. agricultural groups are looking for more trade agreements that mean market access overseas. Kent Bacchus, Executive Director of Government Affairs for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, talks about trade being a bigger priority in past years.
Yeah, I think we've seen a big shift in the overall government approach when it comes to trade. When you go back to previous administrations from Bush and Clinton all the way up to the Obama administration, you had a lot of traditional trade agreements that would have the approval of Congress, and they were negotiated by the executive branch, and they helped open up a lot of export markets. Under Trump, you saw a lot of bilateral agreements emerge. You saw a lot of executive trade agreements that kind of didn't necessarily bypass Congress, but you were able to accomplish some similar results with a different path forward.
He says the priorities shifted early in the Biden administration.
With the Biden administration, they took the position for the first 2 years that they were going to step back and review, and now they've come forward. We've heard comments from Ambassador Tai that trade agreements are a 20th century policy, and that it's basically saying they're old and outdated, and we need to shift the way that we engage. Sadly, in that transition, they have set aside market access, and I'll interpret the trade nerd speak there, and that is when we talk about market access, we're talking about tariff reductions, and we're talking about moving those tariff barriers for our products into other countries.
And he says the cattle industry has faced its share of barriers to overseas access.
For the cattle industry, that's huge. When you look at prior to the Korea Free Trade Agreement, we had a 40% markup on our products into Korea. In Japan, it was 38.5%. In Colombia, it was 80%. Because of trade agreements, we were able to remove those barriers, and now we have much more competitive access into those markets. Where the Biden administration has tried to shift is they want to have focus on trade frameworks, which they're not trade agreements, as they like to always clarify, but they focus on some technical aspects. They're trying to focus on non-tariff trade barriers, technical areas, which those are important. We've seen significant gains in other markets when we were able to address those non-tariff barriers in a broader, comprehensive trade agreement. But without market access on the table, it's been very difficult to get other trade partners to come to the table.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. Coming up in a few moments, we'll have today's This Land of Ours report, but first, more of the day's agriculture news. And with a preview of what you'll hear today on AgNet West, here's Brian German.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture is forecasting a notable decline in California walnut production this year. The 2024 California Walnut Objective Measurement Report is forecasting 670,000 tons, a 19% decline from last year's 824,000 tons. USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service notes the decline is linked to a reduction in bearing acres, down 4% from the previous year. The Walnut Objective Measurement Survey, which sampled 711 blocks, revealed a 24% decrease in average nut set per tree compared to 2023. Despite normal water conditions due to winter storms, heavy spring rains led to some blight in walnut groves, and record summer temperatures increased the need for irrigation. The survey also indicated a slight decline in overall nut quality. In what's being described as a landmark agreement, the Chilean National Congress has secured American exporters' rights to use common food names. Chile has approved a new trade agreement that allows U.S. producers of certain cheeses like Parmesan, Gouda, and Cheddar, and meats like prosciutto and salami to keep selling their products using those common names in Chile. This is an important development because a previous EU-Chile deal made it harder for U.S. exporters to use these terms due to geographical name protections. The agreement was reached after U.S. and Chilean officials worked together ensuring U.S. producers won't lose market access. U.S. dairy and meat industries praised the deal, saying it will help American farmers and exporters grow their business in Chile. It's also part of the U.S.-Chile Free Trade Agreement and could help set a model for similar trade deals with other countries. The agreement will become official 90 days from the National Congress September 3rd approval. The USDA and the U.S. Trade Representative are seeking new members for their agricultural trade advisory committees. These committees, including the Agricultural Policy Advisory Committee and 6 specialized agricultural technical advisory committees, provide trade policy advice. The 6 committees focus on specific sectors: animals and animal products, fruits and vegetables, grains and seeds, processed foods, sweeteners, and tobacco, cotton, peanuts, and hemp. New members will serve 4-year terms starting in January 2025. Applicants must have U.S. agriculture experience, international trade experience, and be U.S. citizens. The committees hold frequent video or teleconference calls and generally meet in Washington, D.C. twice a year. Applications are due by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on September 20th. More information can be found on the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service website. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recently deregulated the HB4 drought-tolerant wheat trait from Bioceres. The announcement has been welcomed by both U.S. Wheat Associates and the National Association of Wheat Growers. The specific trait could help stabilize wheat production during droughts, which is crucial as global wheat demand grows. However, even with USDA approval, HB4 wheat won't be grown commercially in the U.S. just yet. More steps like closed-system field trials are needed to ensure the trait meets industry standards. Both of the organizations emphasize the importance of responsible commercialization, ensuring that the new wheat trait aligns with their principles and gains approval in key export markets. While HB4 wheat is already being grown in Argentina and Brazil, it will take several more years and careful planning before it can be fully commercialized in the U.S. The U.S. Department of Agriculture and the California Department of Food and Agriculture recently announced the end of all 7 fruit fly quarantines in California. The announcement marks a significant victory thanks to a year-long collaborative effort between agricultural officials, farmers, and residents. The quarantine on the oriental fruit fly in the Redlands area was the last one lifted, marking the end of fruit fly quarantines in the state. These pests posed a serious threat to over 400 types of fruits and vegetables, including key crops like oranges, grapes, and tomatoes. The USDA provided over $100 million to support the effort, which included releasing sterile flies and using organic treatments to stop the pests. Officials remind everyone to stay vigilant to prevent new outbreaks by cooperating with agricultural authorities, buying plants from licensed nurseries, and reporting any suspicious pests. I'm Brian German for AgNet West Radio Network.
U.S. ag exports continue to trail behind last year's numbers. That's coming up on this line of hours. U.S. agricultural exports are still trailing last year. Gary Crawford reports.
We now have the complete ag export numbers for the first 10 months of this fiscal year, October through July, and so far the U.S. has exported over $148 billion worth of food and ag products.
Down 3% from the same time last year.
USDA economist Bart Kidder says export sales values have trailed 2023 levels all year long. Of course, one reason is that there's a lot of product out there competing for buyers.
In addition, the decreased unit values of these products is, making it so that even if we're exporting the same amount, we're getting less money for it.
And for some products, we're exporting more volume than last year. Kinder says, for example,
wheat and corn exports were up into the double digits in terms of volume, even though their values were down.
So it is a tough market out there. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
What are some of the notable data points on controlled environment agriculture within the 2022 Census of Agriculture? Rod Bain looks into it.
You may not be familiar with the term controlled environment agriculture. But if you have seen or consumed food grown in a greenhouse, a hoop house, an indoor vertical farm, or one with components of aquaponics, then you have experience with CEA. So what are some of the trends associated with controlled environment ag and food production? A recent look at 2022 Census of Agriculture data covering CEA was conducted by USDA horticultural researcher James Altland and Carmen Azzaretti of the Resource Innovation Institute. Among the areas of focus,
we have greenhouse tomatoes, we have greenhouse fruits and berries, we have this category of other greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs, and also mushrooms, which is an often forgotten slice of CEA, even though it's not kind of in greenhouses. We go through operations, area, and sales. And these are the 3 pieces of information that we have about these food crops.
So according to the recent Census of Ag, the breakdown of what is classified as food grown under protection, i.e. greenhouses and other forms of CEA, appears this way. Tomatoes make up 40% of CEA area, yet mushrooms, only covering 19% of controlled environment ag area nationwide, had a greater value per acre than tomatoes. James Altland offers a potential reason for that.
The growth of the mushroom market, a lot of it is geared towards cosmetics. not food. So the growth of the mushroom market is for these companies like the Johnson & Johnsons and the Procters & Gambles needing natural ingredients for their products. There's consumer demand for that. I wonder to what extent are they willing to pay more than, say, the local shopper at a grocery store?
Regarding the top 5 states for total greenhouse operations, Michigan leads in that category. And as Altland points out,
New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, that makes sense to me. They're kind of in the center of the United States. They're accessible. They can reach most of the country's population within one day to be classified as a local food.
Yet he wonders why Washington is also in the top 5 of states for total greenhouse operation. Azzaretti points to similar climates and ag commodities between Washington and the other northern tier states on the list.
These are operations that have these products under protection. It does not mean it's their primary product. It does not mean that it even makes up 10% of their area. I think having these farms that have a lot of diverse products that might be adapting, might be a little more consumer facing, being in those areas I think are a lot more common.
The top 5 states for CEA growing area for food crops, in order: California, Ohio, Texas, New York, and Kentucky. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Farm production expenses may fall this year. Gary Crawford has more.
Back at the beginning of this year, economists at the Agriculture Department were forecasting a run-up in farm production expenses, including higher prices for most production inputs.
But they're now forecasting a decrease of $4.4 billion, or about 1%.
USDA's chief economist Seth Meyer says on average nationally, farmers will see livestock feed prices down from a year ago, down by over 12%. The analysts have lowered their projections for fuels and pesticide expenses, which could be about 9.5% lower than last year.
But also a downward revision in their expectations for fertilizer expenses. So overall, they're expecting a easing of input prices as well.
For fertilizer, those prices could end up almost 10% lower than a year ago. However, some expenses are still projected up from last year, including interest, property taxes, livestock and poultry purchases, and also labor. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
And here's USDA Chief Economist Seth Meyer with more key numbers from USDA's 2024 Farm Income Forecast.
Net cash farm income for the calendar year 2024, right now is forecast at $154.1 billion, which is down $12 billion, or about a little over 7% relative to 2023 in nominal dollars. Net farm income is forecast at $140 billion, down $6.5 billion, or 4.4%. From the prior year as well, too. And so what we're looking at is from 23 into 24, a further decline in both net cash farm income and net farm income.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Let's talk about LEP. What are the key benefits of your products for farmers in the Western Zone?
So Live Earth Products, we mine and manufacture a ingredient called humate. Now, humate is rich in organic acids called humic acid and fulvic acid. Now, those are common components in your soil organic matter. And here in the western United States, unlike those places around the Mississippi going east, actually have very low organic matter. Now, your organic matter is key think of it as the pantry in the soil. So it's key to water retention, nutrient retention, nutrient cycling, microbial activity, those kind of things. So anything that's going to impact the increase in soil organic matter will also impact things like water holding capacity and nutrient holding capacity, which is a big deal here in the West when water is not as abundant as it is in the east side of the United States.
Now, what about nitrate? I know nitrate can be a problem in some soils. So how do LEP products help reduce the nitrate problem on saturated soils?
So Live Earth Products, it's not unique in how we affect nitrogen, but any organic matter will help retain nitrogen. So typically the mechanisms that we use are blending the nitrogen with the humate. So what happens is the nitrogen will attach to the humic acid, and you will see less of the processes that degrade or volatilize nitrogen. So nitrogen will either convert to a gas, or it'll be converted by microbes into a nitrate and leach to the soil. So the longer you have that product is not being volatilized or converted, the longer opportunity for that nutrient to be used by the plant. We have university testing that has shown that when you blend these organic acids with the nutrient, you give that plant a longer opportunity to use that nutrient before it's lost, volatilized, or converted.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com. This is the AgNet News Hour. We will be back in just a moment with more agriculture news. You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halverson. Here is today's featured interview from the Farm Progress Show.
I'm at the Farm Progress Show, and I'm visiting with Scott Nelson. And Scott, you've got a company called Make Hay. That sounds just perfect for this kind of an audience we've got out here at the show. Tell me a little bit about your company and what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Chuck. So Make Hay. First and foremost, consumers today want to know more about where their food is coming from. They want to know the ingredients they're putting in their body. They want to know who's growing it. That is no longer a nice to have, it is table stakes. Therefore, all the companies in the food and agricultural space are trying to figure out how to tell the consumers more about where their food comes from. Food transparency is a thing, and it's not going away. So that's number one. Number two is there are amazing stories that are happening on this land every day. We visited many farms and many producers and growers and ranchers and whatnot, and the things that happen on their land on a daily basis are fascinating. And so we saw all of this, and we're like, how do we export this storytelling? How do we create a larger platform for these stories to be heard? While doing so, how do we create a secondary revenue stream for farmers without having to leave their land to help them prosper on their farms? So we created a platform, and it's all about digital video content creation. So we are connecting the producers with brands and companies that have stories to tell around food and where it comes from.
So you've built a platform to do this. Describe, in layman's terms, we probably need, what that takes to create that kind of a platform, and where are you at in sort of the building up of this?
Yeah, so we're already backed. So we're backed by Purdue University. It all incubated out of one of their amazing programs there called Dial Ventures. So it's a fellowship program incubator. So Purdue University is behind us, and then a High Alpha Innovation, which is out of Indianapolis, one of the leading venture capital studios in the world. So we have some really good backers behind us. We're about 5 months old. The technology is built and the platform is there. There are farmers and ranchers and producers already on it, utilizing it. It's a very simple platform that creates different briefs or different project assignments, footage requests from certain brands that then get fed to the farmer. The farmer will get a text or an email saying, this brand, this company wants footage of this. Maybe they just want like simple video footage of harvest season. Maybe they want simple footage of like the most important practice on their farm, a day in the life of a farm in Indiana and Iowa, all sorts of different requests that make for really good video content. Then the farmer, the rancher, the producer goes and creates that content, uploads it back into our platform, and then you have a platform full of all sorts of different video content that can be monetized.
So these farmers who are creating the content, essentially, do you have certain standards they have to meet, or how does that play?
Yeah, so it starts on the brand company side, the folks that are looking for the content, looking for that specific video storytelling that they want to be told. They will put into the brief, we call it. So think of it as just like guardrails and requirements around the type of footage that they need. So our software, leveraging AI and all sorts of really amazing little bells and whistles of technology in today's world, will help generate a specific ask for that farmer that specifically tells them what to go shoot and the types of thing they want them to talk about in their own words. Like, we don't want to put too many handcuffs on what they're creating because then it's not authentic. But we give them the guardrails on which to, like, this is what we're looking for.
So I assume they create some kind of an account, a farmer account, and then who would be other people that would want accounts in there? It'd be obviously these brands, right?
Yeah, exactly. So think of all these equipment manufacturers that are here. Think of John Deere, think of Kubota, think of Fendt. Think of all of these folks here have customers that are using their equipment, and as a brand, as a company here, I want those stories. I want to know what that farmer is doing with my machinery, and if he could create some content from, the tractor on autopilot around harvest season that I can then use across my social media channels as the brand or elsewhere throughout, different sort of distribution points. That's gold in today's world. They want real, raw, authentic storytelling from the people that are using their products. So that's a perfect example of there are lots of folks out there with John Deere equipment. There are lots of folks out there with Kubota equipment. And Kubota, someone like Kubota, they leverage celebrities, right? Like Blake Sheldon or whatnot. But there's a lot of folks like you and I that might have a Kubota that can use the camera on their phone and press play on a video. And that content can then be leveraged by a brand like Kubota or insert any brand that's here, manufacturer or company, to tell the stories of how their customers are using their equipment. And that raises awareness, it gets to the right channels, it's diverse, it's really interesting, authentic content from the people using their product.
So can farmers get an account that don't necessarily want to create an account for a brand, but to find something on their own?
Exactly. So that's the other thing. So farmers can create their own profile, and they'll be in our system. So let's say there's a farmer that really wants to work with insert brand, right? He has their tractor, or he has a piece of their equipment, and he's never worked with them before. He can fill out in his profile the types of companies and manufacturers and brands that he wants to create for. And then when that brand comes into our platform and they create a brief, create a content footage request, that person will come up in as one of the outputs of here are the types of farmers that have raised their hands that would want to create for you. So it's a way for it's a way for farmers, producers of all kinds to connect with companies and brands and create content for them. So it's kind of a matchmaking service in some respects as well.
You have farmers already involved in it. How are things going here at the start?
Yeah, so we started very intentionally with a closed invite-only group of a variety of different farmers across 8 to 9 different states. And that's just as a technology company, we need that input and insight from real farmers and producers to get their feedback on all right, it's too hard to do this, or you need to simplify that process, or I can't upload this video, what's going on? So we had about 60 days of feedback from the field, if you will. And now we're at a place where we're starting to invite pilot partners on, the brands, to start sending out this request to all of these different farmers. So things are going really well. The farmer interest is really awesome, to be honest. There's a lot of folks out there that might want to tell their story, but they don't know how to. They don't have the resources, they don't have the time. So in a platform like that can enable them and give them a little bit of help, it seems to be working thus far. And then for the content creators that are already doing really amazing things with big followers on TikTok and Instagram, you see them, they're all around the show, by the way. We just met a bunch of them. So they're already really good content creators. They know what they're doing, right? But they're also farmers first or what have you. But they create content. It's a part of the daily operation, right? And so they like our platform because, yes, they're working with brands and companies right now, but this will expose them to other ones that they may not have ever thought that they actually could create content for. So it's a good, diverse group of farmers that are utilizing our technology for different use cases.
Are you focused on certain kinds of commodities or crops at this point?
Right now, obviously, specialty crop seems to make sense in terms of when you start to look at the supply chain and exactly where that specific product was grown and where it came from. Whereas some of the row crop stuff and what we're doing, there's a few steps removed, right? But we've seen folks that just want to support agriculture at large, and so they just want video content of a farmer doing really interesting things with water. Or they want a farmer talking about the 5th generation of their farm and what that means. They want really great, amazing footage of harvest season. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of utilize our product.
Is it planned, or do you foresee that this would be something, whether it's farmers or brands, outside of the United States?
Yes, yeah. We wanted to start here, of course, but we already have a lot of inbound interest from South America, Europe, etc. But first and foremost, this is where we will start. But yes, farming is global, as we know. Food is coming from all over the place, right? And so how do we amplify and empower agriculture at large?
Well, how does a farmer get involved? What's the steps and where do they need to go?
For now, they can go to gomakey.com. That's our website. And you click on farmers, and there's a sign-up sheet. And we're here with a whole team, introducing ourselves to not only brands but farmers and getting them to sign up. It's very easy to sign up to this product. But yes, for now, GoMakeHay.com, click on farmers, and you'll have the sign up right in front of you.
All right, well, before we close, anything else you want folks to know we didn't touch on?
It's a simple piece of technology that we've gotten a lot of input from the farmer side. We understand that there's a lot of tech startups that come into agriculture, and they don't necessarily listen or have empathy for that farmer. We spent 7 months listening and hearing and trying to figure out the best farmer-first product. So I guess that's what I would want people to know, is that we have their backs, and we've built this in a very intentional manner.
All right, well, this is fascinating, Scott. You got a good idea here, and look to stay in touch and as you develop. So here from the Farm Progress Show, I'm Chuck Zimmerman reporting.
You're listening to the AgNet News Hour. Now for more news. The Powering Affordable Clean Energy program is one of USDA's rural development offerings designed to improve rural electric and rural energy production and availability. Rod Bain reports.
An announcement to keep pace going in rural America.
This is an announcement of $140 million with 5 different agreements, 1 in Nevada and 4 in Kentucky.
Agriculture Deputy Secretary Xochitl Torres Small with the recent announcement in Nevada, associated with the Powering Affordable Clean Energy program. PACE.
There's 2 solar power facilities. The facility in Nevada also has storage to help with that reliability piece. And then there's also some hydroelectric investments as well in Kentucky.
As part of these projects, under this rural development program,
the next phase will be working on a community benefit plan, making sure that these investments really result in investments in the community, looking at land use, looking at labor, looking at jobs created, and working to make sure that it's having a real impact in the rural places we're investing in.
To date, $600 million of $1 billion in Inflation Reduction Act funding has been invested in PACE projects. And the Deputy Secretary notes the connection between PACE and other rural development electrification programs.
This is part of a broader effort specifically to drive down energy costs. So another related program is the Rural Energy for America program, and that's available to rural small businesses as well as farms across the country. If they want to invest in renewable or energy efficient projects, they can receive funding through rural development to drive down those energy costs as well. And then investing in rural electric cooperatives specifically and helping them update their infrastructure and provide affordable clean energy.
Deputy Secretary Torres Small's PACE announcement in Nevada occurred in the community of Pahrump, west of Las Vegas, which is part of another USDA-led effort, the Rural Partners Network. Pahrump is one of 36 community networks in 10 states and Puerto Rico, networks that are part of a federal collaboration headed by the Agriculture Department to help underserved communities receive access to federal funding.
Through that, the Valley Electric, which is the cooperative that received this PACE grant, was able to also work with rural development to get some technical assistance for the Rural Energy for America program for small businesses and farms to drive down their energy costs and help those farms and small businesses apply for those grants.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
That's today's top agriculture news. I'm Sabrina Halverson. Thank you for sharing your morning with us.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West online at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find our broadcast team of Brian German and Sabrina Halverson on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for listening to the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. AgNet West Radio Network, your primary choice for agriculture news.